You are listening to the third segment of our four-part series, The History and Medicinal Benefits of Tea and Coffee with Susan Weed at Time Monk Radio. Hello, Susan. Welcome back to Time Monk Radio.
Hi, Gemini. It's always a delight to be here with you. We spent a couple of weeks talking about tea, and now we're going to look at another caffeinated beverage, and that is coffee. But before we leave tea behind, I want you to know that a study published in the American Journal of Epidemiology found that people who drank 2 or more cups of tea daily were less likely to develop Parkinson's disease. Black and green tea contain antioxidants that have 20 times more power to protect against free radicals than vitamin E supplements. Green tea was also found to lower the risk of blood clots and of clumping, thus reducing the risk of stroke. Meanwhile, researchers in the Journal of the American Medical Association found that drinking coffee regularly counteracts the age-related degenerative process in the brain that leads to lower amounts of the brain hormone dopamine, and this, of course, is a key factor in developing Parkinson's disease. So take your choice. Drink a cup of tea or 2 or 3 on a daily basis, or drink coffee regularly, and you will have less risk of developing Parkinson's disease. Coffee drinkers live longer. Now, that's a great headline, isn't it? New studies counter the fear that coffee is bad for you. In the largest study of its kind, more than 400,000 people, we found both men and women coffee drinkers less likely to die over a 13-year span than non-coffee drinkers. Whether they drank regular coffee or decaf coffee made no difference. It's not the caffeine, indeed. And interestingly enough, the more coffee they drank, up to, are you going to guess? You got it. Up to 6 cups a day, the less likely they were to die during the study period. Remember, there was a 7-cup threshold with tea as well. People who drank up to 7 cups of tea got the health benefits. People who drank more than 7 cups of tea didn't. So the threshold with coffee is just about the same place at 6 to 7 cups. The association between coffee consumption and reduced mortality was modest, about 12% for men and 16% for women. And that was for those who were drinking 4 or 5 cups a day. But the biggest concern for the longest time has been that drinking coffee is somehow a risky thing to do, and our results found that this just is not true. When the participants drank coffee, they found that there was less respiratory disease, less heart disease, less stroke, less diabetes, less infection, even less injuries and accidents. And remember, there are compounds, especially caffeine, that make us more alert. The only thing that did not correlate to coffee and tea consumption was death from cancer. You recall last week when we were talking about the health benefits of tea, that although there is a lot of evidence out there that tea can prevent the formation of certain cancers, that the Food and Drug Administration says that this evidence is inconclusive, and here is a very large study with almost 500,000 people finding overall lower mortality, but not a particularly strong connection with less mortality from cancer. All right, the study didn't prove that drinking coffee makes us live longer. It just proves that people who do drink coffee live longer. And this is not a reason to run out and start drinking coffee if you don't already. But if you do, let's look at what it is you're drinking. First of all, that simple cup of coffee is a really complex mix of biologically active components. Chinese researchers found that compounds in coffee inhibit the formation of protein compounds that contribute to the death of cells in the pancreas, and especially those that produce insulin. That's why coffee drinkers have less type 2 diabetes. Researchers also found that chlorogenic acid, which is naturally found in coffee, has significant inhibitory effects on compounds that cause the death of pancreatic cells. So, kind of two things going on there in terms of your pancreas, diabetes, and coffee. And that is that drinking coffee helps to prevent cell deaths, and it has inhibitory effects on other compounds that cause cell death as well. So not only does it do it, but it also inhibits other things that could do it as well. An analysis of 9 years of data on the 43,000 participants in the European Prospective Investigation into Cancer and Nutrition, which they abbreviate EPIC, EPIC, concluded that coffee won't hurt your heart and won't give you cancer, but that it does reduce your risk of diabetes. Participants who drank 4 or more cups of coffee daily were 23 to 30% less likely to develop diabetes than those who drank less than a cup a day. All right, again, that is a pretty big risk reduction. So 1/3 risk reduction there. It doesn't mean that you're altogether 1/3 less likely, but that your risk is 1/3 smaller. The apparent protective benefit of coffee, and this echoes the benefits seen in a 2009 meta-analysis, could be due to a wide variety of compounds in coffee, possibly the high magnesium content, possibly the antioxidant lignans that are in coffee, or perhaps it's that chlorogenic acid. It's not, however, the caffeine. Remember that those who drank decaffeinated coffee had a reduced risk of diabetes, and in fact, the decaf drinkers actually had an even lower risk of developing diabetes than those who drank their coffee with caffeine. Compounds in unfiltered coffee, however, such as those from percolated coffee or French press coffee, raise unhealthy LDL cholesterol. Oils called terpenes are thought to be to blame. Filtering coffee, such as in a drip coffee maker, removes the terpenes. Similarly, somebody the other day told me they were making nourishing herbal infusion in a French press, and I went through the roof. I said, "Rawr! Do not do that! Rawr! No. There's something about what happens to the compounds in plants, whether it's tea, coffee, or herbs put in a French press. It is not good and healthy for our bodies, so avoid that method of brewing it. And hey, we are talking about real tea and real coffee here. Now, if you remember from last week, the most current research has found that adding real milk to your coffee will not inhibit the antioxidants, the chlorogenic acids in the coffee, but that adding milk to your tea probably will. However, if we are talking about adding non-milk things like soy fake milk or any of those other fake milks or lots and lots of sugar, things like that, then we're not talking medicinal coffee anymore. I'm not saying that it has to be black, but I often remember the time when I was in Spain first, and I didn't realize before going there that the last meal of the day is eaten very, very late indeed in Spain. Very unlikely that you'll be sitting down to the table before 10 o'clock at night. And that's not a light little meal at that time. It is an enormous amount of quite heavy and dense food that you're being served at that time. And at the end of the meal comes the medicine that one needs if one is going to eat such dense, rich food at 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock at night, and that is espresso, a single shot, strong, dark coffee. Oh, get down the hatch with it, because indeed it does improve digestion, and that is one of its primary medicinal uses. However, just think of the opposite end of the day. Somebody wakes up and they decide they're going to have some coffee so that they're more alert, and that coffee, which is such a digestive stimulant, goes down into a stomach that has nothing to digest in it. You're right. No wonder sometimes people say, coffee makes my stomach acid. It does. It's supposed to, but there's supposed to be food in there when coffee makes your stomach acid. I remember equally being in Paris with my sweetheart and going into restaurant after restaurant, especially in the morning, and he asking for coffee, ordering coffee, and although he speaks quite good French, many people absolutely, of the wait staff, absolutely ignoring the fact that he was asking for coffee, because to them it's almost a heinous sin to drink your coffee before you have eaten your food. Understand, coffee follows the food. Coffee is like tea, something that has been used for a very, very long time. And like tea, coffee is a perennial evergreen shrub that grows only in very warm places. It has star-shaped tubular flowers that are fragrant with the scent very much like jasmine blossoms, and the flowers last only a couple of days. And they come all throughout the growing season. The individual plant may have fruits and flowers all at the same time. The berries follow the flowers. The coffee berry the fruit, and they first are green and then yellow, and finally, when they are ripe, they are bright red, and it may take 6 or 7 months from the time when the coffee plant flowers until we get a ripe bean. The ripe fruits of the coffee plant are called cherries, coffee cherries. So what we call coffee beans are not the whole cherry, they're actually the seeds at the center of this fruit, and each coffee cherry, which is red, contains 2 seeds, and that's the part that we use as coffee, is the bean or the seed. There are all kinds of legends about our discovery of coffee. One of the most prevalent ones is that there was a young goat herder who noticed that the goats liked a particular shrub, and that they would eat the red fruit off of this shrub, and that when they did, they became extremely lively, and that they would jump around and play even more than goats do. Being a goat herd myself, I can tell you that goats are frequently jumping around and playing and knocking horns. But perhaps one would notice if they did it even more, especially after eating coffee. Well, the goat herd brought a monk out and showed the monk this particular plant. And the monk ate some of the berries and said, "Wow, this is really great. I feel wide awake. I feel absolutely refreshed. I am going to find a way that I can continue to do this." And he took them home, and he boiled them up, and he drank the liquid, and soon all of the monks in the monastery were harvesting this fruit and brewing it up and using it to stay awake during their late-night worship sessions. A variation of this legend says that Sheikh Omar of Yemen discovered coffee while exiled, starving. He survived on the fruit of the coffee plant and saved the hard beans inside, which he boiled and used to cure the sick. Isn't that wonderful when we can be of help to others even when we are having a hard time? Arabica coffee grew wild in the volcanic soils of what is now Ethiopia along the Great Rift Valley, which runs from Mozambique across East Africa and up through the Arabian Peninsula to Lebanon. For thousands of years, the coffee plant's leaves and fruits have been known for their stimulating properties. The Ethiopians consume the seeds roasted, crushed, and mixed with fat. Woohoo! The very first energy bar, a nutritious portable food, and a stimulant for warriors and those on the road. And coffee made its way from Yemen to Istanbul, where it became known by the Turkish name kahve. And this word, kahve or coffee, has gone into most languages: Cambodian cafe, Chinese kiefe, Danish coffee, Dutch coffee, Finnish coffee, French cafe, German cafe, Italian cafe, Malay kewa and kopi, Portuguese cafe, Spanish cafe, Swedish coffee, all from the Arabic kawa, which means a beverage with a stimulant effect. And when you read kawa in a book about plants, it's hard to know sometimes whether it means wine or whether it means something else. But nowadays, when we say kawa, cafe, coffee, we know exactly what it is we're talking about and what it is that we want. Well, I'm not much of a coffee drinker myself, but I do know that to make a good cup of coffee, freshly roasted beans are absolutely critical. Just as in making a wonderful cup of tea, we did not want old stale tea. We do not want old stale coffee, and even more so with the coffee, because coffee beans contain oils, and those oils can go off. So one of the keys, of course, to making a really great cup of coffee is to grind those coffee beans just before brewing the coffee. This is certainly something that I do with almost all other nuts and seeds in my cooking practices. I buy whole wheat and I grind it into flour. I would not buy already ground the flour. Ooh, that's rancid. And so with our coffee, buy the best coffee that you can, fair traded, wonderful idea, ecologically grown, even better, although it doesn't necessarily have to go all the way to organic because that gets a little expensive. What else we need, whatever it is, whatever kind of pot we have to use, that pot should be sparkling, because those coffee oils that I was just talking about that get rancid, well, they can actually get right into your coffee pot and like kind of scale it up and get in there, and then all the coffee you brew in that pot is going to taste rancid. So one of the things my mom, who brewed a lot of coffee, said was never let the coffee sit around in your pot. If you have extra coffee, put it in a jar and wash out that coffee pot. Keep that coffee pot sparkling. Fresh water, oh, fresh water, please. And just like with the tea, it should not be boiling. What do we say with the tea? That we brought the water up to a boil for the health effects of killing any kind of pathogenic bacteria that were in that water, and then we let it cool off, and I suggested by 10 to 12 degrees down to 200, and the coffee experts agree a temperature between 195 and 205 is ideal for coffee. That's right around that 200 degrees. If you're not so sure, you could use a thermometer. There's lots of instant thermometers, and it's fun. How much coffee to water? Oh, 50 to 60 beans for 6 ounces of water, 4 to 6 minutes for extraction, and the great golden cardinal rule of coffee brewing: never, ever reheat your coffee. One of my friends, who is very much into coffee, makes his coffee, pours it into a thermos, and pours it out sip by sip, so that he can have a coffee at the perfect temperature without ever having to reheat his coffee. Coffee drinking, would you believe it, has been controversial. In 1511, the governor of Mecca, Observing boisterous coffee drinkers in the streets at night, and after consulting two Persian physicians, ruled coffee drinking unlawful. Fortunately, the Sultan of Egypt approved of coffee, saying that anything, even the sacred waters of the Zamzam well, could be abused, and he ordered the governor to withdraw his prohibition. In 1675, with English coffee houses fast multiplying centers of political debate, Charles II, fearful of dissension, shut them down. He did that in December, but by January, the public outcry was so huge that he had to open them up again. Not long later, when coffee reached Sweden, its rapid spread led to a royal edict in 1746 against coffee drinking and an attempt at prohibition that was repeated again and again and again for the next 100 years, always without success. Over here in America, coffee houses were immediately hotbeds of intellectual debate. In 1740, Benjamin Franklin opened a retail coffee business in Philadelphia as a sideline to his printing business. And you can imagine that all kinds of interesting things went down there. Caffeine, which is found in the leaves and fruits of the coffee plant, tea leaves, cocoa beans, cola nuts, mate, guarana seeds, and dozens of other plant species not usually consumed by people, acts, among other things, as an insect repellent. It is a bitter, white, odorless powder which can be produced synthetically and is currently being produced synthetically. We're going to spend a little time next week talking about caffeine itself, because there are so many things now that you can get with caffeine added to them. We talked about tea in the 2 previous weeks and some of the actual health benefits of the caffeine in the tea, and the same for coffee. The real health benefits to the caffeine in coffee, although, as we've seen, the coffee can be decaffeinated and still have health benefits. But caffeine being added to so many other things, like not just drinks, but chewing gum as well, has got the Food and Drug Administration a little bit worried, and me too. Bitter, white, odorless power can be produced synthetically. A dose of 10 grams, roughly the equivalent of 100 cups of coffee, is lethal. It increases heart rate, blood pressure, blood flow to the muscles, and the amount of the neurotransmitter dopamine in the brain. It triggers the release of glucose by the liver, improves mental functioning, enhances mood, stimulates the central nervous system, improves memory, brings about interesting thoughts, decreases fatigue, including muscle fatigue, enhances endurance, especially during prolonged exercise, and has a positive effect on alertness, perception, and vigilance. Whoa! Remember, I said those things that we say. I feel calm when I drink a cup of coffee. I feel good when I eat chocolate. I feel alert when I drink coffee. These things are true. Tea does make us calmer. Coffee does make us feel good. And chocolate does make us feel good. And coffee makes us feel far more alert. Now, there's a bit of a downside to this, and we will get to that. Let's, before we leave this caffeine, and we'll come back to it, talk about removing caffeine. Caffeine can be removed from the roasted beans or from the coffee itself. Most commercial processes treat the coffee beans, and they treat them while they're still green. First, they soak them in water with a solvent such as methylene chloride or ethyl acetate, neither of which is a pretty stuff. And this removes the caffeine, and then the beans are washed, hopefully to remove that solvent, and then steamed, hopefully to remove more of the solvent, and then dried, and hopefully there's no solvent left. However, the direct solvent process, patented in Germany over 100 years ago, produces more than half of today's decaffeinated coffee. A more expensive method uses water extraction with a solvent to remove the caffeine from the already brewed coffee. This is called the Swiss water process. There is yet a third way of doing it called the Swiss water process, which uses only water with activated charcoal. And a new method of decaffeinating coffee, a fourth method, using supercritical carbon dioxide, which is carbon dioxide under pressure, to dissolve caffeine, was developed by Hogg in 1971 and is in somewhat limited use. Most of coffee's antioxidant properties are attributed to the chlorogenic acid, plus caffeic acid and quinic acid. These are the most abundant polyphenols in coffee. Caffeine, as we know, inhibits low-density lipoprotein oxidation and helps keep plaque from accumulating on the artery walls. Thus, drinking coffee or drinking tea does help to prevent heart disease. The chemical theophylline found in coffee, as well as tea, acts to enlarge air passages in the lungs and can prevent asthma attacks. I remember Jeannie Rose, a wonderful herbalist. Her book is Herbs and Things. There's very severe deep breathing properties, telling me that of all the herbs she found, that tea was the very, very best to help her lungs open up and breathe. So if you're a tea drinker, it'll be tea, and if you're not, then it might be coffee that will do it. Coffee drinking has been shown to help prevent cancer, to prevent cataracts, to prevent type 2 diabetes, to prevent gallstones, cirrhosis of the liver, Parkinson's disease, heart disease, and retard the onset of cancer, diabetes, and heart disease. Wow. There are so many wonderful things that we are finding out about coffee and about tea and about caffeine and the things that they can do for us. A large study found that older adults who drank at least 1 cup a day, regular or decaf coffee, had a lower risk of dying than non-coffee drinkers. Yes, indeed. Overall, coffee drinkers live longer. The American Cancer Society's cancer prevention study followed nearly 1 million participants for 26 years. Those who repeated drinking more than 4 cups of caffeinated coffee a day had a 50% lower risk of dying of mouth and throat cancer than those who drank coffee only occasionally. A cup of coffee is 8 ounces. So a grande is 16 ounces. So that's 2 grandes a day. The researchers found that people who drank decaf also have a lower risk of dying from mouth and throat cancer. However, tea drinkers did not have a lower risk. Again, this study does not prove that drinking coffee lowers the risk of mouth and throat cancer. And 4 cups of coffee for many people would be a lot of coffee. It would make them jittery, but coffee does contain compounds that protect against DNA damage in animals. And since tobacco and alcohol are strong risk factors for mouth and throat cancer, and people who drink and smoke usually drink coffee, it seems to be kind of a good go-together thing there. Well, as with tea, I have more to say about coffee than we can confine to 1 week's program. So, we're going to come back next week, and we're going to talk about coffee and the caffeine in coffee. And I think we might have an opportunity at that time to move a little bit into looking at chocolate, because, of course, we have these great 3 substances that we so love: tea, coffee, and chocolate. This is Susan Weed here with you at Time Monk Radio. Come and visit me at www.susunweed.com or at wisewomanmentor.com. And while you're out on the net, stop by the Wise Woman Book Shop.com. And there you'll find all of my books, including Wise Woman Herbal for the Childbearing Year, my big green book for everybody, Healing Wise, my newest book down there, The Wise Woman Way, new menopausal years, The Wise Woman Way, and breast cancer, breast health, exclamation point, The Wise Woman Way. And may I remind you that prostate cancer and breast cancer are quite similar. I do have a very thorough treatment of preventing prostate cancer and dealing with it in down there, but you may also find the information in what we generally call the breast book. Helpful as well. Thank you, listeners, for being here, for joining me, Susan Weed at Time Monk Radio, to experience green blessings and to help us all remember that herbal medicine is people's medicine. It's the medicine right outside your door.
Thank you, Susan. This completes the third segment of our four-part series, The History and Medicinal Benefits of Tea and Coffee, with Susan Weed at Time Monk Radio.